He has presented a variety of topics from leadership to indigenous nation building, and from curriculum development to pedagogy, and from historical and contemporary Native American issues to the education of numerous colleges and universities, private and public high schools, national and international conference institutes and symposia. It's a great honor for us here in Gesgapegiag and all the Gesgapegiag to honor this gentleman here. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to introduce to you right now Dr. Manley Begay Jr.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, everyone. It's very nice to be here. I had the good fortune to be at Gesgapegiag yesterday, and I couldn't help but just admire the place that you live. This is an absolutely beautiful, gorgeous country, and you should be so honored and so happy to live here. Not everyone ever has the opportunity to be near the ocean, or near greenery, near water, near just what seems like abundant natural resources. I live in Tucson, Arizona. When I left, it was about 105 or 6 degrees Fahrenheit. And you know, as Beaver, my good friend Beaver was saying, he says, that's a fever. and we're in the middle of a drought. So when it rains and we get thunder and lightning, fires start all the time. So we have fires all over the place. So when I came here, I want to stay. You know, I don't think my wife will let me though. Thanks for the introduction, by the way. It's quite an honor. If there's any claim to fame that I have, it's really my wife, my kids, and also my grandkids. I have 3 grandkids. So they're the ones that bring a certain amount of fame to me. I'm so happy to be part of their lives and for them to be part of my life as well. I was asked to come here to talk about nation rebuilding, or indigenous nation rebuilding renaissance, as the topic says up there, and also the keys to success. And I've been doing this work for gosh, going on over 25 years. I was, years ago, part of the Royal Commission on Aboriginal People, and which brought me up to Ottawa, Montreal, and a lot of other places. And when the Royal Commission was put together, it really presented a lot of challenges for all of us as Aboriginal people. And as the years went on, my travels have taken me all over the world, basically looking at why is it that some indigenous nations do well economically and then others do not do so well. So that's the very basic question that we've been wrestling with all these years. And we think we've come up with some answers in all the travels that we go through. And you take a look at current events today, there's an unbelievable renaissance happening. There's an unbelievable change occurring. This is what I'm seeing in indigenous country. I'm seeing this change for the positive. I'm seeing indigenous nation building nations that work. I'm seeing indigenous nations becoming empowered. I'm seeing language retention rate going up. I'm seeing social pathologies decreasing, alcoholism rate going down, suicide rate going down, domestic violence going down. And it's just it's a wonderful time to be indigenous. And part of the reason why is because we're being empowered to make those changes ourselves. And when we're in control, when we're the ones that are making decisions, magical things happen, wonderful things occur. And this is what I see from Australia to New Zealand, all across Canada, even in Mexico, in certain parts of Mexico, in South America, South Africa, where I was at for the World Sustainable Development Conference years ago. And I was also in Poland shortly after the Iron Curtain fell down. And I saw how Poland was wrestling with, what do we do now that we don't have to report to Moscow, the colonizers? So the question I'm posing to you is, what are you going to do when you no longer have to report to Ottawa? How are you going to run your nation? What are you going to do? And so some of the work that we've been doing really is around answering that very question. What do you do if all of a sudden the responsibilities of your nation fell into your lap and you have to reconstruct your nation? Where do you start? What do you do? How do you go about running a nation that works? Right now, under the Indian Act, somebody else tells you what to do. They send you some money. They tell you how to spend that money. You spend the money how they want you to do it. You send a report back to them. That's not self-governance. That's self-administration. But there's going to come a time here very shortly when you're going to be asked to run the show. You're going to be the ones generating your own funds. You're going to be the ones deciding for this. So what do you do? So my task today is just basically to show you what's going on in indigenous country. What have I seen? And how can those lessons that I've seen help you? Just to get you to begin to think about what to do, how other people have done it, and how you might want to do it. So this is my task, is to provide to you the keys to success and what we've seen. I've been telling you about this change that we've been seeing. There's a movement from self-determination to nation rebuilding. One of the faith keepers at Onondaga of 6 Nations, Oren Lyons, he says, well, we're not in nation building, we're nation rebuilding. So how do you rebuild your nations? And so this is a new era. This is it's unbelievable what I'm seeing all across Canada, the United States, and elsewhere, how indigenous peoples are empowering themselves and how they're redoing things. Mississippi Choctaw, down south, is a really interesting place. Mississippi Choctaw today has a 0% unemployment rate. In other words, every Choctaw that wants a job has a job. Their language retention rate is hovering almost 90%. So in other words, every Choctaw at Mississippi Choctaw is led up to serve Pueblo Council down in the bottom left, right in the middle of El Paso, Texas, have become a thriving First Nation as soon as they went through constitutional reform. Here's the village of Cake from Cake, Alaska, healing heart and circle peacemaking, an elder overseeing the peacemaking operation. Here's the Navajo Nation, where I come from. We have our own police force. We even have our own criminal investigators. My brother is a CI. You know, we see on TV this CI, criminal investigation show. He's a Navajo CI, CSI guy. And he investigates all major crimes on the Navajo Nation. Navajo Nation, where I come from, is huge. We have 27,000 square miles of land. You can drive from one side of the nation to the other side. It takes you 4 or 5 hours. And you won't run into any non-Navajo communities. You go the other way, south to north, the same thing. You won't run into a non-Navajo community. And you can just drive for 4 or 5 hours. You're in Navajo country. And so if a murder occurred in the middle of Navajo country, it takes a long time for federal authorities to arrive there. The FBI, by the time they arrive, the evidence is all gone. So the Navajo Nation said, okay, we're going to have our own criminal investigators. And my brother went to Quantico, Virginia, to Glencoe, Virginia, trained in the FBI Academy, and now conducts, criminal investigations. and Mississippi Choctaw Tribal Police, Flathead Tribal Police as well. Here's the Navajo Nation Supreme Court. We have our own Supreme Court at Navajo. The fundamental law, the main law at Navajo is Navajo fundamental laws. Our laws are based on creation story. According to Navajo way of thinking, we've gone through several worlds to get to this world. And each time in these worlds, we committed, there were sins that were committed. And from those sins came laws of how to act as a Navajo person. Laws about how to treat your wife. Laws about how to talk to each other. Laws about how to relate to people from the outside. Laws about how to treat Mother Earth, the plants and the animals. Laws about how to treat your guests. So those laws are now written down as Navajo fundamental laws. We're a matriarchal, matrilineal, and matrilocal community. So everything goes through the women's side. Everything belongs to the women. My wife owns my Chevy Silverado pickup truck that I love. She owns my flat screen TV. She owns the children, you know. I'm just sort of a guest there. So Navajo Nation laws based on Navajo fundamental laws. That's how we live as a Navajo person. And the Navajo Nation Supreme Court makes sure that these laws are followed. Here's Dishka. Troy was talking about Dishka. Here's their council chambers. That's the Prime Minister addressing the council. And I love their motto, one heart, one path, one nation. There's something about the Indian Act that doesn't allow you to have that. I've seen across Canada, same families intermarried, living right next to each other, saying, I'm not from that community. They're the same people, they're relatives. But they say, through the Indian Act, they say, well, that's not us, that's them. They're married there. They have interrelationships there. And that keeps them apart. But in Nishka, you have one heart, one path, one nation. Here's the critical piece of the puzzle, governance. This is what I want to talk about. This is at the heart of making nations work. It's how indigenous nations organize themselves, how they make decisions, how they resolve disputes, whether they operate under the rule of law, what message they send to both their own people and to outsiders about how their nation works. You have to have law. You have to have rules to follow. The world is not made in such a way that we don't have rules and laws. The animals have laws among themselves. We as human beings have laws among ourselves. And laws are different from one society to another. And we see this all across indigenous country. Some nations are very traditional, following the old systems. Some are very contemporary in building innovative governing structures. Some are sort of in the middle, like the Grand Council of Cree. They've taken sort of the old way of thinking about things, taken a new way of thinking about things, and created the Grand Council of Crees. Created a new government in Canada. So there are different ways to do it. Some have gone to fourth branch government, with the elders being the fourth branch. So my question is, what's Mi'kmaq government like? How was it back when? How should it be now? You also have to think that you can't necessarily go back and build a traditional government, because we've changed. Human beings change all the time. So we have to reinvent ourselves. We have to rebuild our nations to a governing structure that satisfies who we are today in a contemporary sense. So some are building fourth branches of government. That's in addition to the legislative branch, the judicial branch, and the executive branch. Then you have the fourth branch. So in short, the real nation rebuilding challenge is a governance challenge. So what are the keys to success? We think these are 5 keys that really are very, very important. Jurisdiction, jurisdiction, jurisdiction. You've got to have jurisdiction. You have to exercise that jurisdiction. You cannot wait for Canada to give you jurisdiction. You have to exercise that jurisdiction. It's the practice of self-rule. You have to back that up with capable governing institutions. You can have all the sovereignty in the world and still fall flat on your face. You have to back it up with good governing institutions, with rules and policies and constitutions that are in place. Thirdly, those institutions have to be culturally appropriate. It has to say, this is the Migmawei. This is the way we do things here. It's not the Ottawa way, it's not the Cree way, it's not the Blackfoot way, it's the Migmawei. You have to construct that yourself. That's the challenge of nation rebuilding. You have to think long term. You cannot think about just yourself today. You have to think about those that are yet unborn. You have to think about your grandkids. How are they going to live 50 years from now, 100 years from now? You have to plan for them. You don't plan for yourself. That's being selfish. You plan for those that are not born yet, because you want them to have a good life. You want them to remember you. There's grandma, there's grandpa. She did this for me, he did this for me. That's why I live a good life today. Those that are successful, those nations that are successful, are thinking long term. And it's about good leadership. Really good leaders that care for the people, care for the community. So you have to have this jurisdiction, sovereignty, self-rule attitude. The Salish could be tribe of Flathead. They run their entire nation. They're the first self-governing tribe in the United States. They handle everything, even endangered species on their land. They're so good at what they do, they manage every aspect of their land. So my question is, okay, what do you have control over? What are your powers? Do you have control of your cultural religious affairs? Do you have use of your environmental and natural resources? Are you able to business permit and regulate that? Do you set your own citizenship membership criteria? Do you make laws? Can you decide on what kind of government you want to have? Can you tax? Do you have your own court system? If you don't have your own court system, then somebody else is controlling your court system, the way you administer law. In the United States, First Nations have all of that above the red line. The only thing that we don't have is Postal Service, issue our own currency, and have our own military. Although Akwesasne Mohawk say we have a military, because if we want to close down that bridge, we'll close it down if we want to. So, in Canada, I see this red line way up high.